Hello and welcome to the first lecture of N.C.E.R.T. Polity. It's day 2, N.C.E.R.T. Polity, lecture 1. So aim of this module is to actually cover the basics of the polity, in which we will be studying how, why, and what has formed overall from the polity from the very start of the history to the systems of the democracy. What are the types of democracies? What type of system India follows? Why actually we needed the system of governance, so that we have a solid foundation when we start the polity main book. We have already covered what, why, and how of polity before that. So let's start from the very basic. So the basic question that we are going to start with is why actually we create a system of polity. Why do we need a system of polity? So the answer to this is that we live in a society, and the very basic foundation of the society is that humans that are living together tend to also fight between each other. So we can we can get into fights. There can be greedy people between us. We have to control their greed as well. So such things need a regulatory system, which leads us to the establishment of a political system. Plus, because we live in a society, the society is never equal in its sense. In its basic sense, society is never established equally. So if any person at any given time has placed himself on a higher ground, he is thinking of others as to be lower than him. There is no circumstance or no society in the entire world, or even during the historical period, that the entire society has been treated equally. Some place, someone might be getting discriminated at, for some reason. So within the society exist inequalities. These inequalities give birth to discrimination. So if these things are left unchecked, they could actually be very harmful to the human progress. So if we start discriminating people based on their religion, let's suppose, based on their caste, which was the fact during our ancient and medieval India times, when people were divided into different castes or one, and based on that they were given religious privileges. Women were subjugated. So the gender based discrimination, it still exists in the entire society if we have a broader look. Because if I go by the private sector corporations, I can quote this fact from the International Labor Organization, that only 3% of the CEOs around the world, only 3% of the top position, that is chief executive officer, is actually given to a woman. Only just 3% of that office. Rest all are males. So, the company money flow, that is still controlled by the male majority even today. So gender discriminations still exist. Many women are not allowed to study or go outside their home even today. So this is pretty much still present in our society. Even other things, there could be discrimination based on race. Like we have often seen discrimination against blacks in America and around the world. So they have been treated unfairly. There have been cases of police brutality in America, just because they belong to Afro-American race or community, to address it. So the other discrimination, I'm just giving few examples of it, would be economic status. So these and many other factors, anything that can result in inequality, can lead to discrimination. And because of this, we need a system that can control this discrimination. So this system can establish rules, can be an intervening party so that such discriminations don't lead to, snatching away of opportunities from any caste, color, religion, or any other disadvantage that a person might have in the society. So we need polity to create an equal or utopian society to some extent. So how have we come to this democratic system in our history? Let's have a look at that. So at the very beginning of the system, we actually relied upon kings to actually, rule the kingdoms. So they used to form rules, enforce them around the kingdom, and get their things done. And if someone disobeyed these rules, he or she was punished for it. So this enforcement of law actually gave rise to law and order. So this established the law and order situation around the human societies all around the world. So this law and order establishment first came from a king. But the problem with this system is that, it relies on a wisdom of a single person, that is the king, and he may take the advice of the minister, but his wording is always the final. So it pretty much depended on the king, his willingness, his wisdom, and whatever he felt like. So I would like to quote Louis the 14th before the revolution. He said that I am the law. So according to him, according to him, everything he says, everything he feels should be done, has to be done in that way. So he is the law, that every word that comes from my mouth is the law. If I feel like this person should be punished, even if he is innocent, he has to be punished. If I want to, tax the people on something, even if people are being crushed by that tax, they would be taxed on it. So such mentality, that gave rise to uh, grievances and dissentiments among the population, which led to the rise of many thinkers who, started to think about the system where people could represent their own thoughts and the system in itself. So we first vested the entire powers to a political system which was based on a single king's wisdom. When these kings started to turn into dictators, our society was forced to, rethink about these things, that how to actually um, create a better system where people would not be discriminated and it should not rely on a single person's wisdom. This was how democracy was created. I will come to that topic in a while. First, I also need to address two terminologies that exist in our society, and we need to know about their meaning so that in any case they come in your exam for the prelims or you need to use them for your mains exam, you can effectively use them. So one is prejudice and the other is stereotype. What is a prejudice and what is a stereotype? Prejudice actually means to prejudge someone. So this is when we judge someone without actually knowing them. And this judgment is never positive. Prejudice is always used for a negative connotation. This is always a negative judgment. So if I, have to quote an example, without actually referring to any caste, color, religion, or anything. Prejudice, how society has feeded discrimination within our minds. We can actually test this from these two definitions. Prejudice. So let's say there are three people, A, B, C. A, B, C, and um, let's consider just two people in this case. One of them is rich and one of them is poor. One of them is rich and one of them is poor. So how actually do we, the question here is, if one person is rich and one person is poor, and you are told without, looking at any other fact or figure, you are told to, figure out which of them have not taken, let's suppose, bath today, without actually going into the details of how a person lives, where a person lives, nothing. You just see two people and someone sitting beside you just says, tell me which of these two people have not taken a bath today. One is from a poor family and other is from a very rich family, is getting out of a Ferrari or something. So if I tell you, we are not interacting in a live class, but if I ask you, most of you will answer that you have to choose one. So most of you will answer that the poor person has not taken the bath. The fact could be anything, but you have prejudged a person on a negative quotation that this person might have not taken bath. This is called prejudice. Without knowing the person, without knowing the habits of the person, we actually prejudge a person. So this is, a type of thing that has created problem for many people. Like many people from the, let's suppose, Sikh community who were living in America, USA, after 9/11 were attacked because their turbans, their beards resembled with those who had attacked the Twin Towers. So, it's those are very different communities, very different beliefs. Even from people from that community don't believe in same ideology, but still people were attacked just because they were prejudged that this person looks like that, so this is a person who is a terrorist or anything. So many people, actually don't feel welcomed in these societies when we start to judge them before actually we know them. Similarly, the case is about stereotypes. Stereotypes actually is based on specific roles that we imagine people in. For the example, let me give you two uh, professions. If I talk about, I give a very lengthy lecture about soldiers, that all the soldiers that we have sent into the war have been victorious. The soldiers have killed so and so many number of enemies. Soldiers have done this, soldiers have done that. So just imagine whatever scenario that I'm talking about in your head. That soldiers are going into the war and they are mounted on the tanks, on their armored vehicles, they are going into the war. So just for the perspective, which gender actually you imagined the soldier in? Most of the people imagine soldier to be a male person. Soldier is just a profession. Government has allowed both male and female soldiers to join in now. So even a female soldier could be going into a war. But the society has created this stereotype that a job of a soldier is for a male. And same if I talk about a nurse, that nurse is catering to the wounds, nurse is not present here, anything in a scenario. Just imagine a nurse. Whenever you will imagine a nurse, why do you always imagine a female? Nursing is just a course. Anyone can do it, whether it's a male or a female. So most of the people will always answer it to be a female. So this is actually some stereotypes that society has created, that we can only imagine people in certain things or in a certain way. So that's how prejudice and stereotypes actually work in the society. Now, um, coming back to the society, before we jump in that how actually democracy was created, or what systems led, what events or systems led to the creation of democracy, let us first compare so that we can understand why democracy happened in the very first place. So let's compare two systems. One is monarchy and one is democracy. Monarchy is kingship or queenship, where a single family is ruling the entire nation until and unless someone other does a coup and takes over, and then his or her family starts ruling. So it's a single family rule, and this family is not elected by the people, not elected by the people. Here, the king decides everything on his own, all the rules and the policies, then gets them enforced. And he himself is the judge of the same thing. For that, I have already given you an example of, Louis the 14th, before the French Revolution, that he said, I am the law. All right. Not answerable to the people. Or for that case, anyone, even to his own council of ministers, he is not answerable. He can just seek their advice and completely reject it based on his own feelings. And he could be like that, I want to go with this. And no one can question him. That is why this system is so flawed, that a single person decides the future of the entire country based on his own will. And no one can actually stop him. He is, pardon me, he is the one who legislates the law. He is the one who enforces the law. He is the one who judges people and the law according to his will. So this system exists like this. The other system is democracy, where we have elected leaders, power to the people is given, in our case, by the constitution, and some like Britain through the law. But the people have the real power as they decide who will run the country, who will make laws for them, and other such things. Sorry. So, power of the people. Here, the main thing is, if the elected leader does anything wrong, let's suppose we find that our leaders are corrupt, they are taking huge amount of bribes to pass away loans or other contracts to the corporates, To the minimum, we have the power of actually changing our leaders every 5 years. That is the minimum that we can have in our system. And we get the voting right for that. But in the monarchical system, in the monarchy, we can't change the king unless there is a very popular revolt against the king. Other than that, we can't actually, do anything to actually make any changes to the system. It's up to the will of the king. If he feels like that there should be a change, he will make it. Otherwise, he won't. So these are two systems, monarchy and democracy. Next is how democracy actually evolved. So the concept of democracy is quite old, even when it comes to India. So let me give you an example of India. So India, when we will study history, we will be covering this portion. During the Vedic age, Rig Vedic age, we had two bodies for the India. One was Sabha and the other was Samiti. Sabha and Samiti. These were actually representative bodies where the entire Jan is referred to the tribe, used to decide what they have to do. So in general sense, the society decided what they had to do if they were going into a war or they have faced an economic situation. They used to come together and decide together. But this system degraded and India soon had a king of its own to rule on it. As the system got degraded and we've relied more and more on a single person, so the kingships formed even in India. But talking about the modern democracies, Britain is the country which actually led the revolution. So it was not per se anything that was planned. There were many unplanned events that, you know, took a shape of some sort of democracy. So during the 1500s and 1600s, what was happening on the world stage, we need to find out that first. So most of the Europe, even today, is dominated by Christianity, Christians. And that time, church played a very important role in the politics of the Europe, as it guided the kings, it authorized their positions. So the church was a very integral part of the entire polity. So whenever some threat came on the Christianity or the church used to call upon it kings to come for the battle and fight for Christianity and the church. So the challenge was that there was rise of Ottoman Empire in Asia, and with that, the rise of Islamic kingdom. So there was a ground for religious wars in this. Change the color of it. Religious wars. Christians and the Muslims went on war for the control of the territory, for the control of, mainly the European territory, control of many straits, water canals, and also which religion dominated the entire region. So there were, continuous wars, 100 years war, 300 year wars. Kings were continuously fighting for the religion. So whenever Christian kings used to go for the war, these wars were called crusades. So whenever you have to fight a battle or a war, you need two things. One is money, and the other is men. The king needed two things, money and men. So church didn't provided these things. A king had to arrange all this by his own and come to war on behalf of the church. So when it came to Britain, what the ruler did is he started selling rights to his empire. So what he did is, let's suppose this is his empire, this is Britain per se. He started to divide his entire kingdom and started allotting it to different nobles, moneylenders, and landlords. He used to say to them that, please pay me this amount of money and give me this number of men to serve in my military, and in exchange you can have monetary and legal control of this territory. That means you can make any law in this territory and you can apply any tax in this territory without my consent. So I have to go to a war. Please send me money and men frequently. So that's why they are giving the right. But in return, I'm giving you the right of monetary policies and the legal policies. You can make any law. You can apply any taxes and everything. So many nobles, landlords, money lenders, they benefited from the system a lot. So they used to supply the king with the money or the men or the both, and in return they got this control over the territories with all the rights. So what actually took place after that is, when these crusades ended and king returned back to the Britain, he called upon all of them and called on all of them and declared himself a king again, that he needs to control his territory all over again. So what happened here is that when king decided to apply his rules back again and join all its kingdom into a single law and under a single tax, all the money lenders, nobles, and landlords, they objected to it and said that you no longer hold any power. It is us. We have formed a council, and we control the power to it. We control the money. We control the laws. So at the start of it, the king was very angry. So the council, they gave an option to the king. You can either remain a king for eternity till the time Britain exists, or we can actually just kill you and elect a new leader. So his option was, you can just, retire, live off a pension, or we can just kill you and your entire family, and we can elect a new person. So the British king was pretty smart. He decided to remain on the top position. He was given a pension and his throne was kept intact, and till date even queen is presiding over the same throne with the same privileges. This happened in 1680s, and this entire process, that is called Glorious Revolution. So this is considered to be a very basic foundation of democracy when it started. It didn't look like democracy at that point because none of the leaders were elected by the people. But now the power was divided among many people, unlike before when king controlled everything. So it was decentralization of power. Later, when the Industrial Revolution took place, many union leaders also organized strikes, organized groups, and even they wanted to be part of this council so that laws could be made in their presence for the industries and for the workers. So to accommodate their demand, they were let in. Other later, more people were allowed, and so on. So this body slowly evolved into today's British Parliament. That's why if you ask anyone in Britain when actually their democracy started, they won't actually have any fixed date, because at the very start of it there were only rich people in it. Later many other people were added into it. Later union leaders, workers, and so on and so forth. And slowly elections started to take place and the system had developed. So this is how they actually formed a democratic system in Britain. Along with this, during this period only, 1600s, 1700s, 50 or 1500s onward, there was, sorry, 1500 onwards, there was also a phase of Renaissance. We will be studying it in detail when we will be studying the world history. Renaissance is the phase of enlightenment. This is when people in Europe started questioning things. They started questioning, why do we have king? Why do we give king so much power, so much money, so much privileges? And they started to find logic between these things. Why? And many irrational things were also figured out. These things pointed out towards excesses that were done by the king. And they started to think about what actually a person should have as a bare minimum rights. So this is when the concept of justice, equality, freedom, and what place did religion hold in their society and their polity. And with that also came the concept of secularism that we are going to study in further lectures. So all the philosophers that were questioning the privileges of a king were also finding solutions on what better system could be built. In this, one of the front leaders that we have, and I want to mention it here, was Montesquieu. Montesquieu was a French philosopher. So he gave a detailed analysis of why a king, no matter who we elect, always turn into a dictator. 99% of those turn into a dictator. Why do they turn? So he said that, the problem is that we vest a king with all three organs of the government. That is, we give him the power to make law, to enforce law, and to judge. So this gives rise to absolute power. And when a person has absolute power, he would be absolutely corrupt. So what he suggested is that we need to have separation of power. We need to have separation of power where the three organs of the government What are the three organs of the government? Please remember it. It is also the previous year papers question. And this is the reason why we study from the very basics of the subject, because UPSC is not something that asks only the hardest questions. They want to know that do you have the basics of clearing the exam, and do you have the basic knowledge, do you have the concept clarity of it. The three organs on which the government runs are executive, legislative, and judiciary. Executive is a branch to enforce law. It is the one which enforces the law. Even you are preparing for the executive branch only. Once you selected in as an IAS, IPS, or any other services, you will be empowered to enforce the law that has already been created. You can't make a law, you will be enforcing them. You will be an executive. Legislative body in India is your parliament, and every state has a state legislative assembly. Some have councils as well. So state legislatures and the parliament, those are the bodies that make law. To make law, we have judiciary as Supreme Court, High Court, District Court, Session Court, other courts. They are here to judge both the law that has been created, how it is being enforced, and the people based on it. Because any person who commits a crime or anything has to be presented in front of court of law, and they will be deciding it. So what Montesquieu suggested is that we need a system of separation of power, that we need to give all these organs to different set of people, and we need to create boundaries between them so that they don't interfere into each other. And such system should also have a system where these three organs are placed such that they have a system of checks and balance. That is, they should create they should create an equal pyramid, where if one of these organs tries to be more powerful than other, the other two will pull it down. So if they are able to check on each other, plus we have different people to control them, there is a very less chance that there would be any dictatorship. And this is how modern democracies have been created mostly. Yeah. The last concept is how we decide to actually implement our democracy. So actually there can be two types of democracies depending how your constitution works. See, constitution doesn't guarantees democracy. Even countries like North Korea and China, which are in true sense dictatorships, also have their own constitutions. Just like let me give you an example of China. China has a constitution, but that constitution in itself writes that there would be only a single party rule, that is Communist Party of China, and it prescribes everything else. So it doesn't actually give power to people to elect any other party, any other candidate. So in general sense, constitution is just a book, a rule book, and you can write the rules according to it. But most of the modern democracies also have a constitution. The constitution can be written in a book, like India and America. We have a written document about it. where we have prescribed what rules can be enforced, what these three organs can do. So in our system, this constitution, as we have written the rules, it is the most powerful tool. It contains most of the power, and it defines the framework. It defines the boundaries. Framework is the boundaries in which all the three organs have to work. Like the parliament cannot make law based on its own will. It has to stick to the constitution, that if the constitution has given it a power or not. Same is with the executives, that you can't go out and do anything that you wish. Your powers are limited by the constitution of India. It is a written book. You can't mold the laws based on your own convenience. You have to amend, change the constitution first, change that paragraph or that article or that part for that. Some countries also have an unwritten constitution. We call them unwritten democracy. Example of this is Britain, because Britain doesn't have any fixed date when when it became a democracy, and it never actually announced itself to be a democracy within the law. Britain, as a system of democracy, got created with the establishment of its parliament. So in case of Britain, parliament is the most powerful body. British parliament can make law on anything. So, because as I told you about the glory revolution, they were the ones who controlled the power. They established a council that later became a parliament. And even today, parliament can make law on anything. And nobody in the entire Britain can challenge those laws. So that's why they don't have a written book. Written book would always frame limits to what a body can work. Without limits, you can make any laws or work as you feel like. So this was your first lecture of polity. Thank you, and we'll see you in next lecture. Thank you.